Bertie's Chase, based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book Edward the Blue Engine, is the third episode of the second series. This is an episode that has a bit more excitement in it, since as the title suggests, it involves a chase. One morning, Edward is waiting at Wellsworth to pick up passengers for Thomas's train and is growing impatient. His fireman gets up on the cab roof, but says he can only see Bertie, who is likely carrying tourists. With no sign of Thomas, they just leave the station. As they pass the level crossing, Bertie pulls up shouting that he has Thomas's passengers on board since Thomas's fireman is absent, but neither Edward nor his crew hear him. Bertie's driver tells them that they must keep their promise to Thomas and they start to chase Edward. Bertie tries to catch up with Edward, but to no avail. He soon finally reaches the top of a hill and sees Edward at Lower Sudbury, stopped at a level crossing. Bertie tears down the hill at top speed, but the crossing gates close and Edward puffs away just as Bertie comes into the yard. Bertie is now both very upset and tired. He apologises to the passengers, who tell him not to worry and encourage him to start after Edward again. Bertie is not so sure, but his driver says that there is a good chance of catching Edward, as Bertie could climb hills better than him. After checking with the station master, Bertie sets off again. As they carry on, Edward comes to a hill. The coaches start grumbling, but soon they reach the top. Still oblivious about Bertie, they run smoothly into Upper Brandon. The guard blows his whistle, but as the driver looks back, he cannot see the green flag. Suddenly, Bertie comes into the station, and the station master tells the driver and guard what happened. Edward apologises for Bertie, who claims everything was his fault. Passengers board the train and cheer for Bertie, while Edward says goodbye and continues with his journey. Bertie heads off to tell Thomas that all is well. Thomas is grateful for Bertie and thanks him for being such a good friend. This was the second time in the series where Bertie the Bus took the centre stage, and it is really fun and jam-packed like the first episode he was in, Thomas and Bertie. It once again has him racing after another engine, only this time it's Edward, and for different reasons besides being competitive. This episode also shows us a little bit more of Edward's personality. He is usually known for being a calm and patient engine, but there are times when he can get impatient, especially waiting for more passengers at the train when he's running late. And if you know your Railway series history, then you'll realise that this is not something that Britt Alcott and David Mitton created. This actually came from the very first Railway series book, The Three Railway Engines. It was in the unadapted story Edward's Day Out, when Edward is so happy to take a passenger train for the first time in years, but then starts to grow impatient and worried that they'll be late on their journey when they're waiting for the guard. So it was nothing that Britt and David made up for Edward. This was all done by Robert Audrey years ago. And I simply can't talk about this episode without bringing up the fact that Sir Ringo Starr gets to sing again.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? Sang the fireman. Johnny is so long out. Never you mind about Johnny, laughed the driver. Just you climb on the cab and look for Thomas.
It's really quite fitting that he would sing Oh Dear What Can the Matter Be, since it was composed in England in 1780. And I just love how Edward's driver interrupts him by saying like, who cares about Johnny? Just see if you can find Thomas. That is freaking hilarious in my opinion. And it's one of those rare moments in the TV series where Ringo Starr really gets to shine with his singing talents. It's kind of weird how even though Bertie the Bus has a few other leading roles in the future of the series, this along with Thomas and Bertie are the only ones where Bertie's name is in the title. And we once again get to hear Bertie's amazing theme from the first series. As well as a slightly updated theme for the second series. It's a real joy to hear the original theme again, and it's really nice to hear an updated theme for the second series. It's one of those fun-packed episodes where there's nothing life-threatening or urgent that needs to be done aside from just getting passengers to a train. It's just a fun episode with a fun chase, and it's a nice bit of extra excitement after the previous episode. It's another one of those episodes that I do recommend checking out if you haven't seen it for a while, especially if you're a fan of Bertie the Bus. You'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this episode, and you'll get to see him interact with another engine aside from Thomas. So check it out and enjoy watching the chase for yourself.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny is so long out. Never you mind about Johnny.